So let's get started. What were you told that you needed to climb the ladder of success? So I pulled together just a few of the words that people would pop up and say in my seminars, because I would ask people, what did you learn about climbing the ladder of success? So whites were told that you needed to get an education, that, hard work were some of the ways that you climbed the ladder of success. You needed to have an initiative, and you needed connections, as well as having a good appearance. Your speech had to be a certain way. And you needed to have some sense of power about who you were. And opportunities certainly helped, as well as good behavior, staying out of trouble and all those kinds of things. And that's what people would popcorn in my seminar. You asked Black people and people of color, what did you learn you needed to climb the ladder of success? And they would tell you exactly the same thing. Education, hard work, initiative, connections, networking, good appearance, speech, money, opportunity, good behavior. So pretty much the same thing, right? So here's something that was really interesting. Because as we broke it down and we talked about it, you may be told that you need the same things, but the reality of what is expected of you can be very different. It can be very different. So let's take education. So pretty much all people are told that to be successful in life, you need a good education. And a lot of it is worded as to get a good job, you need to get a good education, right? You need to have some degrees and things like that. So when it comes to that, we need to look at how segregated education is in our country and the difference that that makes. So in order to do that, let's do some background work. And for those of you who have been with me since the first week, we talked about the caste system, las castas, and how that was established based on patterns of inheritance and that kind of thing. How that system plays a role in education. Okay, so we talked a little bit about how the castas, which is the caste system, was set up, and everybody internalized that caste system in a specific way. And that caste system has been around, first of all, there have been caste systems all over the world in different forms. There's been slavery all over the world in different forms. The stuff that affects us here in this country today is very specific. So our caste system comes from the caste system that was set up during colonization. And because of the way that that caste system was set up, with Europeans at the top of the top of the chain, right? Literally. People of color, brown people, which were usually natives, were kind of in the middle, and blended people, right? Like mulattoes and so on and so forth. And at the bottom, you have the Africans who were brought in to be workers. The brown people were also made to be workers because of, they had to go into the mines and blah, blah, blah. Okay, so we've covered quite a bit of that stuff. So as a result of the way that the Europeans set up certain things, or how they institutionalize certain things, because remember, it's institutional, systemic, internalized, and interpersonal. Because of the way that they set things up, they automatically, some people were like, even your birth was illegal, okay? So here's what they did. They decided that the only people who could inherit were firstborn male, right? Like everybody pretty much knows that. But it was not just the firstborn male, but the firstborn male that was born into a legal marriage, okay? A legal marriage between two Europeans, okay? Because they were the only ones that were allowed to have legal marriages, all right? So that meant that everybody else who had children, their children were born outside of that legal marriage system, because what they did was they institutionalized that other people couldn't get married, okay? So as a result, children were coming into the world who were virtually illegal by the system, by the structure of that system, okay? they also decided who could get an education. So a European male could get an education. An European female might get an education, but for the most part, it was illegal. And if you got caught with a book, you could be burned at the stake, all right? So now we have education was made illegal because people who were enslaved couldn't get an education. I don't care, if you were enslaved in the Caribbean, in North or Central or South America, if you were an enslaved person, you were not supposed to get an education unless it was deemed by those who owned you that they needed you to have an education so that you could help keep the books or, do some of the stuff that was needed to maintain the wealth, right? Brown people also could not get an education. It was illegal for you to get an education. So what you did was you institutionalized education. And we talked about the things that were institutionalized before. So education was institutionalized, marriage was institutionalized, and marriage meant to not just two Europeans, but two heterosexual Europeans, okay? If you look back into the records, there was a time that same-sex marriages were revered in various parts of the world. And same-sex coupling was revered in various parts of the world. But as human beings were given a monetary value, right? We needed to have people coupling who could produce more people for the system, okay? More people for the system. And same-sex couples can't do that. So they made same-sex coupling illegal, okay? So now you have a system of education that is very, very specific, very specific. In its history, it covers the history of those who can tell the story. Right? And who can tell the story? The people who are in power. Because remember, the way that the caste system was set up, whites internalized the caste system in a very specific way. Brown people internalized the caste system in a very specific way. And Black people internalized the system in a very specific way. So whites internalized it as supremacy, which because they were already in charge, right? They gave some what people call privilege, which is access and opportunity to other whites so that they could maintain power. They could maintain power because remember, more than 70% of the world are people of color, Black and brown people, okay? And so there's a fear of the revolt that comes with that. There's always this internalized fear of the revolt that shows up with people. And there are, I've done exercises with people where they can find where they're holding that fear of the revolt and is still holding it in their bodies. So you have this educational system that was set up at first very specifically for European males, okay? People eventually started learning more and more, and then they started allowing some of the European women to learn to read and write in some places, not all places. I remember one of my best friend's grandma is from Italy, and she got caught in the basement reading a novel and was beaten to a pulp because women were not supposed to learn to read and write. And so that was my friend's grandma's grandmother, whom she knew, and she told her the story. So you have women and you have people of color who are not allowed to get an education. That doesn't mean people didn't, okay? Because people are who we are, right? And so people would find a way to learn to read and write. Some people were self-taught. Some people watched other people. They listened, and so they were able to do that. So now we have an educational system that expects everyone to not just get an education, but get a particular, for most companies nowadays, they want you to have a higher education in order for you to get the job. Now, I have something that I used to tell my children, because I've had enough experiences in this world to know that some things we say and they just ain't true, okay? It is what it is. So I used to always tell my children, get a good education so you can figure out who you are. so that you can really find a way to be happy and joyous and fulfilled in this world. I didn't tell my children, get a good education so you can get a good job, because I knew personally and from the people around me that getting a good education did not guarantee me a good job. And even if it guaranteed me a decent job, it didn't guarantee me a good pay.